And by that, I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who usually do a deep dive into a new book series one book at a time. Even though we are currently blazing through the Poppy Wars, we are taking this special episode to actually do a deep dive into R.F. Kuang's newest book, Babel! Which, by the time this comes out, is hopefully out in this week. Yeah. Laura and I were lucky enough to get advanced reader copies of Babel, and we read it months before it came out, and we were both ecstatic as we read it together. It took us each a week to get through.
We read it so fast, and it's so long.
It's like 706 pages, guys, and we both read it within a week, less than, because it's just that good, honestly.
It's amazing. And then Laura hit a book slump because I was like, nothing compares to this book.
I read Priory afterwards, and I felt bad for Priory because I was like, listen, I'm not giving you the best.
I feel bad
Go
for
forward
you.
because Babel was so fantastic and out of this world. So this bonus episode is us kind of just selling you on reading Babel, and then maybe getting into some spoiler territory if you have already read Babel, or if you just don't plan on reading a 706-page book and you want to hear all about why we loved this book.
Yes, and it's so good.
I know, and so this will just be a bonus. We're not going to do our reading, watching, and enjoying list, because we also did this episode so much earlier than other episodes because we wanted it fresh in our minds for you, our listeners. So, with
Refresh.
Babel, if you guys have not gotten it, pause the podcast if you need to, or just listen to us and order it now.
Pre-order.
Yeah.
So I had major envy because Hannah received an arc of it, and I was like, oh my gosh.
It for both of us.
I know, but I was still no! I want to read it now! And so I started NetGalley, which was ultimately a bad decision because now I have a bunch of NetGalleys piled up.
Welcome to my world, Laura.
And that's why I had been holding off on NetGalley. But I got the NetGalley copy of Babel, and I was so excited. And then Hannah and I buddy read it together, and it was so fun to just buddy read a book. And
buddy read a book so we both loved.
Yes.
Because there were moments where I had my sister come visit and Laura got to finish it, and I was like, I'm actually just jealous you're getting to finish it. I want to enjoy this book so badly, even though I was having a wonderful weekend with people. Oh God, this book is so good.
Sorry, sister, you don't compare it to Babel.
I mean, she does. I do love my baby-ness and my nephew, but it was such a good book. So Laura, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Babel is about?
So Babel follows our protagonist, Robin, who is essentially plucked from his home in China to study languages at Oxford.
Mm-hmm. And this is a world where languages are important because they work in silver, and they are able to write certain things in languages, and between the two languages, they're able to kind of power it up with a certain magical realism. So it's how they make, carts go faster, and this is kind of old
silver's
London.
Used for healing and technologies such as, like Hannah said, transportation. They move trolleys and things like carts, things like that with silver. It's also used for amplification of things as well. So all sorts of different ways to kind of quote unquote power up our things that we have now. Silver's used for. And
it's kind of it's like a historical retelling almost, where it's the same world we live in kind of, but silver reigns supreme. And it's all about Robin following him from his childhood as he studies languages before he is trotted off to Oxford to really get into things. And the book deals in themes of race, identity, just caste systems. It kind of deals with everything in between with that. Feminism, and R.F. Kuang is so good at these topics.
Yes.
And it feels real, and you feel anger and frustration and horror and joy for these characters. So
I mean, there were many times when I was reading the book that I was questioning myself, wait, did this actually happen? And I had to be no, Laura, think silver work is not actually a thing in the world. You would have known about this.
Well, and I think, I don't know, because I will have read the Poppy Wars by the time this episode comes out, but I haven't read the Poppy Wars. Does she do footnotes there as she does here?
No.
Okay, so a very specific detail of Babel that I found very unique was R.F. Kuang often puts footnotes into hers to contextualize different things from the real world for you. And it often, we're dealing with people who are at Oxford, so it often feels like a very like academic book.
Yes.
In the best sense, because she went to Oxford.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see like her retelling of it in this very specific space.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows I love old English things. So I was like living my best life as I was reading up on that.
Well, even the title itself, it's like an arcane history of, it's called Babel, an arcane history of translation. Is that...
I actually think that there's something about like an uprising, because I think that that's kind of hinted at it.
I think that's the whole title. We keep calling it just Babel, but it's actually the way that the title itself is written sounds like it's a historical book.
Right. It's called Babel, or the Necessity of Violence, an arcane history of the Oxford Translators' Revolution.
Yeah, which does sound like a nonfiction book.
Yes, it does. And when you're reading it, it just like it deals with so many key elements that I think it feels like she studied history and was looking at things like that. I think she used silver as almost like an amalgamation of like, you know, oil industry and technology as it stood. And instead of doing that, she kind of gave people a more palatable thing by being like, oh, it's all silver.
And she definitely did study history. She studied Chinese history, I believe, and languages and writing, if I'm not for sure on this, but I know she studied like Chinese literature and Chinese history.
Right.
So,
and that she delves into that in the Poppy War very much. So this is more of her like offshoot of like, I went to Oxford, so like I'm actually very interested in their history, and I'm going to like wrap up what I know from my own academic career.
Right.
And I think it's interesting watching the book, because like as you're reading it, you are getting a very specific type of academic career where it's like, I feel a part of this and I feel all the greatness of this, but I also feel almost ostracized from it, which actually like Laura and I feel like we've had different situations when we were in college where we felt like we were part of something but not part of something. So I think it can resonate with anyone who's reading the book, even though it is a honking massive book that deals with very deep topics.
And I think most people that have been in college can relate to the experiences that the main character talks about. But like Hannah said, anyone really that's been a part of something can relate to this.
Yeah.
Any kind of fraternity-like situation.
Right. And this book is just so fantastic. We cannot say it.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But like the way Kuang looks at different histories and the way she's able to develop different characters who feel different ways about like society, because I think a very interesting thing about the main character Robin is he's part of this community and he loves being a part of the community,
but is conflicted at the same time.
Right, because he sees some of the bad parts of it. And I think like that's where it goes into identity and intersectionality, because Robin is Chinese, and in this time period there is a lot of open racism and colorism. So like he gets certain privileges that his other classmates do not get based on the color of his skin, or based on if he's in a situation where he can be white passing, as it were. And so we're seeing someone be conflicted and see everything, but it's from like a very personal perspective.
Right.
And like what I love about Kuang is like I often found myself struggling with Robin, and like she does so well at giving us a very flawed character. But like I don't think anyone in this book is perfect.
No, there's not a character that is perfect. But I think you can find pieces of yourself in all of the characters. There were many times when I would be like, oh, I'm totally this character. And I'm like shaking my head like, oh, why am I like this character? And then other times you would find, like I would find myself in Robin and be like, oh my gosh, why am I like this? Or get frustrated with different characters, even though you overall thought the character was amazing.
Right. And it's just so detailed and amazing. And I think she just handles so many topics so well that I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so impressed by this woman. And I want to be her friend, even though it would be very intimidating. But Laura, what was your favorite part about the book?
My favorite part... I think my favorite part is the journey that the main character takes in kind of a realization of his situation, where he realizes how he benefits from his own privileges that he has, while still recognizing that he's not as privileged as other people in society that he's in, and how he comes to terms with that and wants to move forward in a way that's going to be progressive and helpful to others. What was your favorite part?
I would say a lot of that. I really loved his complex like journey as it came through, and I liked that like we talk about like how he sees all of his privileges, but also sometimes his reactions are very different than I expected them to be.
Right.
And I liked that it wasn't something where like I was like,
could
oh,
call
well,
it.
yeah, where he's this type of character who understands he has this privilege, but he does love to benefit from it, so he's going to react this way. Like anytime he took a turn, I was like, oh, this is so realistic, because we just don't know how humans will react to something.
Sure.
So I love that, and like this is a bias on my part, and probably no one else will resonate with it the way I will. But the way she wrote, like, reminded me of law school. Like,
sure.
Of the deep, like, entrenchment of actually learning something like languages, where you, like, it's, like, there were so many just passages that resonated with me as an academic person who was like, oh yeah, all they could ever talk about was how languages were everywhere in the world. Right. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember those conversations as a law student.
How consuming it is when it's just like the rest of the world is not this involved in that situation.
Mm-hmm. And even like leaving law school, there was such a like resonance of like, oh my gosh, the entire world has gone on existing. And I even mentioned this recently in like a conversation with Laura, where I was like, oh, it's interesting to see her outside perspective of what I was like in law school, because like I was so in it, I couldn't see anything outside of it, and she was so outside of it, she did not understand all the time being in it. And so I do think that there's like a unique experience when it comes to the journey of Robin, where like as he starts seeing the outside world, he's like, okay, and it's the whole privilege thing again, where it's like, oh, I benefited so much from being inside this, and I have to make an active choice to remove myself from it. And that's a hard decision to make on the personal level, even if you can recognize the context of why that can be necessary.
Right.
So I thought this book was so well done. I loved all the characters. Like, even when I hated them, I loved them, because it was watching people be messy. And I think that that's sometimes the best book you can write.
Sure.
And you got to see people making mistakes. And there were like so many moments where I would have dread in my body because I knew something was coming, but I couldn't look away from it. And I think that it's a book that makes you feel everything very viscerally, at least from my perspective.
Before we get into spoilers, like, who would you recommend this book for?
Honestly, like, anyone. Like,
I was thinking about this myself. Like, who would I recommend this book to? Because sometimes I read books and I'm like, you know what, that's not the right book for this person, or that's not the right book for this person. But I think this book is one that's important, and I think it's palatable in a way that it's covering very difficult topics that people need to be reading about, in a way that it's not going to be, I don't know the word I'm looking for, not offensive, but
it's going to make you ask the difficult questions without like shoving everything down your throat, or it wasn't like, you know, a litmus test of like, this is exactly how you should be perfect all the time. It's a very realistic look at the world.
For sure.
I also think, like, I don't know, you and I are singing its praises. Maybe in like 6 years, smarter people than two cis white women sitting talking on a podcast would be like, they didn't see all these key issues, and it's like, that is fair enough, and we are always open to being critiqued.
This is just in this moment in time in 2022. We, two white women, feel this way.
Yes, exactly. And we would never try to like crap on anyone else's take on this, but like as we were reading it, it feels like one of those novels that could be taught in school.
Yeah.
And it just, the way she wrote it was just so spectacular and unique and diverse in its like thinking and like themes, and the way she writes about her themes. Like, this feels like an academic text when you're reading it.
Sure.
Even though it's very enjoyable, and I think the masses can enjoy it. And I also think like lots of people who listen to our podcast are fantasy readers. Sure. So you do get that like fantasy realism.
Yeah. There's not a ton of fantasy. I mean, coming off of the Wheel of Time series, not even comparable amounts of fantasy. But, I mean, it's still a decent dose of fantasy for fantasy readers.
Right. So I think it's one of those books where I'm like, well, for fantasy readers, there's enough fantasy, but I think it'll be unique to you because the historical implications of this novel are so deep that, like, I feel like a lot of people who will nerd out on this book will be like, I want to read about like what that was, you know, like what it actually was in the real world. Because like I said, I think Silver was more an amalgamation of a lot of different things. That's an easier theme to pull from than say like 5 different other elements. But then for non-fantasy readers, I think like the historical aspect and kind of like the amazingness of it is so good. Laura, who is your favorite character?
So do you want to start getting into like spoiler territory?
I mean, we could probably do, if that gets into spoiler, we can maybe get into spoilers territory. So yeah, people who haven't read this book, order it now. Just order it, definitely. Is there anything else you can say to like recommend it more?
I mean, I can't think of anything else to sing this book's praises more. There's nothing to be said, honestly, because this book is so good. Everyone's been talking about it, and for good reason. It's amazing. Barnes & Noble was having actually a really good pre-order package where you got a signed copy of the book. That's what I did.
I did not know that. You didn't tell me about that.
It had like annotations in it, supposedly. I haven't got it yet, so
I know.
We'll see if they actually hold up to their end of the deal.
I might have to pre-order that, but like, yeah, it has a 4.53 rating on Goodreads.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
It's so good.
I will say I looked on Goodreads, and there were some questions that people had asked about the book that weren't answered, so I was just going to answer a couple. That yes, colonialism is dealt with in the book heavily, and there are characters who are black, and it's a diverse cast of characters. There are also queer characters. So those were like the 3 questions that I noticed that people had asked on Goodreads that were unanswered. So I'm answering them.
Right.
That it's a diverse cast of characters and colonialism is dealt with.
But I'm glad you looked on Goodreads. You're always the person who does the research.
I'm not always the person who does the research. I just get curious about things and I want to know what people ask.
That's fair. No, I like that. Yeah, there is queer representation. I would say like the one thing is like I think that queer is not dealt with as heavily in other topics.
No.
But like diversity there, colonialism there, like so many things are dealt with in such a well like handled tone that like all of that stuff is there. I would just say queerness is more hinted at, and it's not as
it's subtle, but it's there.
Yes, little like some overtones of romance, although not very much. And man, does she know how to pull on your heartstrings.
Yeah. Find it, pre-order it.
Order this book, enjoy it. It's great. Drop everything, read this book.
Yes.
We cannot recommend it enough. Any nitpicks we have in the spoiler section will be so small compared to the greatness of this book. So
R.F. Kuang's amazing. I mean, so smart.
Yes.
I want to be friends with her, but I'm not smart enough. So.
Right? I know. It's just so interesting, and love it, read it. And without further ado, turn this off right now and come back and listen to us as we get into
after you read it.
Spoiler section. So, all right, it is the spoiler zone. Spoiler zone.
Welcome to the VIP.
If you are here, it is because you have either actually read the book or you are too lazy to read the book. Wow, we both said equally mean things in a different way. I kill people lazy. Laura said you just don't give a shit. So,
I mean, that's typically me when I go to the spoiler section. I'm just like, the people on the podcast, turn this off now if you don't want to hear any spoilers. Nah.
I'm not going to do that. I do it sometimes, mostly with fiction fans. I'm like, oh, I actually want to read that book, so I'll wait.
I always listen to fiction fans. I can't turn off their podcast.
I love that. It has to be a very specific one, because oftentimes I'm like, I'm not going to remember this in 5 months. Like, I love them, but like I'm not going to remember all the key details of a plot. And then I'll be like, oh, right.
I can't even remember key details from plot of a book that I read like last week sometimes. Right?
Like Laura said, normalize just liking a book for the vibes and not knowing anything about it.
Everything about it.
It's I gave Laura a present for her birthday, and she was like looking at stuff, and I was like, I don't remember what book that is. I'm gonna have to look that up later. So, But now that we are in the spoiler section, Laura, who was your favorite character?
My favorite character was Rami.
I mean,
I loved Rami so much. Is it Rami or Remy? I want to say Rami.
I feel like Rami is probably, Rami.
But Rami was my favorite character. He was so complex. There was so much to this character that you could understand the motivations as to why he acted the way that he did, and also why he kind of masked parts of himself. And what a great character. Rami comes from India and grew up in a family that was well off in India. Tragedy struck and their whole lives shifted, and they became servants for a wealthy English family, a wealthy English man. And Rami was kind of taken under the wing of this wealthy Englishman because he had a knack for languages and basically was just used for the amusement of this man. And him and his family were not really seen as anything but just kind of like little toys for this man's disposal. And so when Rami was older, he was able to study languages and then eventually had the opportunity to go to Oxford. His motivations for being at Oxford were ultimately to be able to kind of rise up against the
masses and the people, the oppressors, pretty much.
The oppressors. And his way of doing that was by learning as much as he could and kind of being an actor to gain access to different things.
Rami is probably the best. He's the purest character in this book in some ways. I forget what was the other girl's name that we... Letty. No, and who was the fourth girl? Or the other fourth... Victoire. Thank you. I'm so bad with names.
This is Robin, Victoire, Rami. Gosh, I can't say words today. Rami and Letty.
And this is the core 4 group that Robin goes to classes with.
This is the cohort at Oxford.
Yes. And I greatly enjoyed Rami. I thought he was amazing. I don't even know if I can pick a favorite character. I think Rami was one of the most interesting characters. There are hints R.F. Kuang doesn't even give us the full backstory of each of these characters. Right. There are certain moments where I think you can pick up on what you want of those characters.
Sure.
And I think Rami was a very interesting character in how he dealt with the people in the group and him coming to it from a very specific backstory.
Sure.
And he, I loved him because, in the book for people, he was, juxtaposed with Robin, who, Robin enjoyed all the fruit of what they were doing. And he kind of had these, rose-colored glasses of, almost this, well, if I'm involved, then later on I can fix things. Where Rami was no, we're never going to fix these things because it's built on corrupt ground. So we need to be able to fight. And yes, I'm working at this, but it's not for the benefit of anyone else. And I think Robin was someone who wanted to benefit people because he wanted that validation coming from an external source. And Rami was not the same. He was no, I'm here for the people I love and to make the world a better place.
Right.
And I think watching those two types of characters was so interesting. And then, Letty is of course, at the beginning, the well-meaning white woman.
I mean, through most of the book, Letty is the oblivious, well-meaning white woman. And this was a character that Hannah and I talked about a lot because I struggled with this character because I saw so much of myself at times in this character because I am a well-meaning white woman. And it's difficult to come to grips with that sometimes and to see these things play out. And it's a difficult character for well-meaning white women to deal with, but I think it's worth reading.
Right, because I also think, through the character of Letty, we get the danger of well-meaningness, because it's one of those things where people are well, if you're an out-and-out racist, people know to protect themselves from you, but if you're well-meaning, your internal racism can hurt worse or have deeper ramifications than you recognize. And I think we got to see all of those ramifications through Letty. And there were a lot of things that made me uncomfortable with her that we talked about, where it's Letty is in love with Rami. And there's this insidious nature of when we do see, because in certain parts of this book, R.F. Kuang shifts this perspective to people, and she has certain language where she's well, her Rami, they changed him, he's different. And I'm he was never yours, but you still had this possessiveness because you loved him in a certain way, and you felt this and it does come to this internalized racism where it's well, he must love me because I have to be worthy, and if he doesn't love me, what does that say about me? And it's it says he doesn't love you.
I think I think insidious is a good word, the way to describe her at times is because you are reading about things with her, and I think there's a tendency to be oh, we should pity her because she's not receiving love back or whatever, but that type of attitude that she gets a lot where everything is always kind of easy for her and handed to her, and even though she herself has experienced sexism hardcore throughout the book, because Letty is a character that kind of grew up in a wealthy family in her brother's shadow. Her brother kind of threw away all the privileges that he had, and Letty was able to kind of scoop up those privileges, and she had to work hard to get the things that she did because her family was very unaccepting of having a woman seek higher education and pursue languages. But at the same time, Letty does not understand that her skin color gives her so many privileges, and her wealth gives her so many privileges.
And her benefit of her class is just like so important to this. And I think like it's one of those things where, especially with her juxtaposition again with Victoire, where Victoire is a black woman who from Haiti. So she is already an immigrant coming to this country who, like, anytime one of these people who is not white gets to go to Babel, it's supposed to be seen as like this great thing that other people are bestowing upon them, as like, isn't it wonderful you got this opportunity? Instead of being like, no, they've worked hard, and because they worked hard, they're here. And like there's just this shift of like privilege that people have of like, well, we're giving you the benefit because you came from this poor country. But then throughout the book, you also, like, a lot of this book is about colonialism and the insidious nature of colonialism, where like people, they like, London ripped silver away from all these other countries, and then they're like, well, of course we ripped them away, we had the technology to advance it. But then through their colonialism, they're like watering down all these languages that actually make silver a benefit. And so they keep trying to go towards these countries where they could use silver, and they keep ripping away these people from their own culture and westernizing them. And it's so, and again, it's like this insidious nature of like, isn't it great to have all this knowledge, but with it comes like a Western based living and a lot of like, well, you should just be grateful for any scrap we give you. And like, I think Rami is a very interesting character for Letty to be in love with, because Rami is the character who most is like, I don't have to be grateful to you. This isn't right. You guys are not right for what you're doing. And Letty is someone who like almost expects them to be grateful for the things that she notices, even though she notices the bare minimum. Like there are so many sections of this book where she's like, I didn't know that was going on. And of course, like immediately after, she's always like, well, why didn't you tell me? And it's like, because the onus isn't on the person being put down to make sure you see them being put down. It's for you to accept that that's happening and keep your eyes open for that kind of thing. And so Letty is a very insidious character who kind of shows all the harm that people who quote unquote mean well can do, and people who haven't done their own work can like really mess everything up. So that was the character Lauren I struggled with the most, because it doesn't hold punches. Like it shows you what a well-meaning white woman can do. And we were both like, there are shades of Letty in us, and we have to be very open about that, because I mean, I think we're both very aware of the fact that we ourselves are well-meaning white women, and that we will always have work to do, always have things to learn about, and that we'll never fully understand the experiences of other people. But that's also like something Kuang did so well, because like I said, with the character Robin is someone who benefits from certain privileges, even though he is a Chinese man who was taken from his home. Yeah, we learned that Robin actually, he is taken under the wing of a professor, and he's literally just plucked from his home, from his dying mother, by a professor who he learns later is his father. And huge spoiler, but like it's also not a spoiler, because it's hinted at throughout the entire book, where like they are like, oh, they look alike, oh, he came and he paid for a nanny for this boy, and he did these things, which also shows like the commodification of people in like a lot of these older stories, where he is very much commodified by his own father, and he is seen as like, shouldn't you just be grateful that I gave you this opportunity and I gave you life, quote unquote. And it's just like, no, that's not, you're using a person as an experiment, and it's disgusting, and it's very disgusting the way he's used. And we even find out that Robin has a brother who was similarly and like they find out that it is very much like Laura said, an experiment, where he was ripped from the home too soon, so he didn't understand his language as well. And so then it's just like this, oh, well, it didn't work this time, so it'll have to work next time. And it's a very heartbreaking story, but like Kuang does such a good job of showing all the different elements of like, she also shows what anger can do when you've been subjugated, and it's always like a very valid experience when people get angry, and there are certain things that are hard to take, but they're interesting to take. Like we said, you never know what Robin's reactions will be, but anytime he has one, it feels very realistic to how a character would react in those times. Because there are moments where he's like, I'm angry and I want other people to feel bad because I feel angry. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, that's a valid emotion because he has been beat down for a lot of his life or told
Right.
like awful things in front of his face because people do not see him as a person. And that is a dangerous thing to do to a person, you know, and that's an awful thing to do to a person. So, like we said, these are very complex characters.
Yeah, for sure.
Rami is definitely the one who you feel the strongest for and like you want him to conquer all.
I don't know that Rami was necessarily the person I felt the strongest for, but I felt very connected to that character. I think the one that I felt the strongest for was Victoire, wanting her to be able to have a win, honestly, because there were so many times, even in just simple things in their instruction at Babel, that she would suggest something or have an idea for something and was immediately shot down on that idea because she was black.
Yeah.
And that's all the reason there was to it, or that she was a black woman. And that's all the reason there was to it, that her ideas were not accepted. And it progresses further that there's worse things that happen to her throughout the book, but she's always so intuitive of her situation and wants to continue to move on and do good, that for me, that was a character that I was like, please just let this character have a win.
Right. No, that's a great point and well said. And Victoire, I think for us was probably the character, you're right, we felt the most for because we were often frustrated because we didn't think, it was almost this thing of like, I don't know if this was like an active choice by Kuang, but you and I were like, I wish she had more time on the page.
Yes.
Like out of all the characters, she felt like the one we didn't sit with enough. And it was almost because like, again, I do think that there's a little bit of like intersectionality as a black woman. She had all these experiences and she was like, I've had the roughest time. And so like, I'm here with my eyes wide open and I don't need like, you know, this distilled thing of like all this, you know, different connecting.
Sure.
And we also don't spend as much time with her because Robin doesn't spend as much time with her
Right.
out of all of them.
Right.
And like, I think you and I were frustrated by that because we were like,
Sure.
Victoire earned time on the page
Yeah.
and like, we just wish she had some more
Right.
to see her really flourish. But I do think like Kuang gave her a very fitting end. I won't give away the ending
We
for
won't
sure.
spoil the end.
No, but like, I was glad to see how that ending worked because again, I just think that there's a lot of details getting involved where each character gets like their own unique story and own unique emotions, which was excellent.
Yeah. So we also learn in this book that there is a secret society that is trying to use the things that they're teaching at Babel, which the name Babel is the name of the tower at Oxford where they are studying, which in itself is very smart to use this because of the biblical ties to the Tower of Babel, how they had their languages taken from them so they could not communicate with God. And so all of this is just really well thought out, really well written. But when Oxford has a cohort begin at Babel, and when Robin's cohort begins at Babel, they're kind of like in this process of learning about everything, you know, and kind of getting into learning how in their first year they do this, in the second year they do this, third year they start learning about silver work, and fourth year they decide like what they're going to kind of be in fully. And right away, Robin kind of learns about this secret organization that is taking resources from Babel to bring them out into the world and use them for the benefit of other people besides just England.
Yes. And it's called the Hermes Society.
Yes.
Do with that what you will thematically.
Yeah.
Like transportation and all this stuff. But it is interesting. It was also very interesting that like Robin kind of gets sucked in very early on with the Hermes Society because of his own, you know, past and his own connections to it. And it's very interesting because he kind of walks into it with like it's almost like he's doing it for selfish reasons. And I think that that's how he's often different than Rami, where like Rami is doing it for his like people and his culture and fighting against the oppressive nature of this. Where sometimes Robin is a very much like, how does this affect me?
Like somebody's going to catch me. I got to help them and cover this up to protect myself.
Yes. And like, I don't want hard questions or like my father invalidated me as his son, so I feel like I have no other choice but to join this society. And he doesn't actually like come at it from always the healthiest standpoint, which is an interesting like take on it, on someone joining a secret society, because I think a lot of books would have had him been like, I'm all in, and
there would have been several oaths and all this, but throughout the society is very, very secretive about who's in, what they can know, where they can meet, and that to me is super interesting.
Yes, I also loved like the mundanity of it, like because I think a lot of times in books like this you could have like, it's a secret society, so there are like oaths and masks and all this stuff, when really it's just like he had to write a lot of stuff down, and he sometimes had to slip some things in his pocket. Yeah. And it's like, no, that's realistic if you're like a low totem person.
Sneak some people in here.
Yeah, like open a door. Right. And there is so much of that where I think you can almost get from Robin the whole like, it is coming from selfish reasons, and then he's doing all this stuff and he's like, well, why aren't I more important to this? Right. And I'm doing all this stuff, where is my acknowledgement? And I think that comes from like how he was raised and how he was taught to see like value as a person. And so it's interesting to watch him kind of struggle with that, and like everything that happens to him because of his own internal struggle. So
yeah, and that's interesting too, because as a child, Robin has struggled with the fact that his mother was left in China to die, the fact that he was brought up kind of in a somewhat, I don't know, the fluffy lifestyle basically, and allotted so many things, and then at the same time was treated pretty poorly by the professor. So it's definitely something that he has to battle with himself, is how he feels about himself, his race, how he struggles with his class, and yeah, it's all connected, really.
Right. And so like, this is just such a well executed book. It deserves like every page that she used to write.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And like what she does in all of this is very amazing. Like just watching him grow up, we get to sit with Robin for a very long time and understand his isolation and understand his motivation as a person. And then like he does some like shady stuff. Like we find out that he keeps information away from kids. And at first, like there's also a very specific view that I noticed with Kuang, where it's like sometimes you do something and you convince yourself that you're doing it for one reason, and then all the truth comes out, and then you have to admit to yourself that you were actually doing it for another reason. Right. And she did that a lot with Robin, where he would like tell himself something over and over again. And like as I'm reading it, like I didn't always believe him because he's not exactly the most reliable of narrators, but sometimes I was like, oh, okay, so this is his motivation. And then like the truth comes out and he's like, I just knew you would react this way. And I was like, oh, there was this insidious like lying to yourself, so you're lying to the reader. And so there is a very much like unreliable narrator portion of this that's so interesting. And that's why it like even became more effective when Kuang like shifted the perspective and we got to have like a snippet of someone else's life. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is just like such a well done way of using like POV in a very unique way after reading so much Robert Jordan.
Oh yeah.
This book was just fantastic in the way she uses the work and the characters. Is there anything else that like you're like, this point was so good in the book?
Just go get it.
Go get it. Guys, we just love this book so much. We were so honored to get an early copy of this book.
Thank you, NetGalley.
Thank you so much.
Harper Voyager.
Voyager for sending us a copy of this book. I did not expect it. It was really, I said I threw everything at the board to get one of these. I was like, we will write a blog post. We will put it on Instagram. We will do a podcast episode about it. We're doing an in-depth analysis of her series. So like,
we put up a picture of R.F. Kuang in our homes.
It's my favorite picture of R.F. Kuang. I like her with the bangs. So. But yes, read this book, guys. Go out and get it. I mean, if you've listened this long, we haven't spoiled everything.
Right. There's still so much to read. We haven't covered it. I mean, it had to have taken us 20 hours to read this book, I would say. So we're covering this in less than an hour. There's plenty more for you to learn.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a book where I would say there was no skimming involved for us. Like, there was never a time when either of us probably were reading this and thinking, okay, well, let's just hurry up and get through this part. Because so much of it was just so good.
Well, and even, like, any time with the professors, you're learning, like, it's never, like, world building for the sake of world building,
Right.
in my opinion. It's always, like, foreshadowing or teaching you the history of something that, like, probably happened in the real world. It's just also using silver. So you're learning so much. And, God, I'm just so impressed by this book. So, I mean, a little bit of justice for Victoire, but...
If that's our only hot take, like, we want more of this character.
Yeah.
It sucks that we're white women.
I mean,
like, those are our hot takes.
fair.
Come on, people.
It sucks that, like, we had to address our own internalized issues and unlearn
Here's
some
our
things.
problem with the book. We're white.
That is a fair take. And so if people want to listen to this episode and it's like, oh my God, this is two white women, I need to go listen to smarter people.
Yeah.
We get it.
It's fine.
Like,
It's fine. We understand.
If you heard us, like, do some, like, in-depth analysis on Letty and you're like, oh my God, that's the character they had to assess. And it's like, well, she is the one who made us have to address certain things in ourselves. So, you know, it just, sometimes you have to do that and go listen to other people who have different experiences than us, because we are.
And I'm sure there's been some interviews that Kuang has done that are probably out on YouTube. Those would be great to check out as well.
Yes, and Kuang is excellent about making sure, like, this goes to diverse people as well.
Yeah.
Because I remember Nat Galley in the first slew of releases, there was a lot of, like, complaints that, again, it's a lot of white book reviewers getting these books, and R.F. Kuang was like, don't worry, I'm talking to the publisher, we're gonna fix that. And so she is amazing. She deserves all our money and all our time. So pick up Babel today, and follow us along as we keep blazing through the Poppy Wars. I'm not going to get into everything because it's just a bonus episode, but guys, join us next time. Bye!
Bye!